So when you think the Way West, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing actually is Sally Field, but that's a whole different story. It was it's funny. I had a crush on Sally. She was in a TV series here called Gidget. Just the year before we did The Way West, and suddenly, and my dad actually wrote some of the Gidget episodes. So I watched the show regularly and, had a crush on her like a lot of American boys. And the next thing I know is I'm running around the Oregon forest chasing her. But my other big memory of The Way West was the scope of it all. I graduated from high school in June, and the next day, this is in the summer of 1966, I get on a plane and go to Oregon. And we started in Eugene, Oregon. And my first day, I went out in front of the hotel to get on transportation out to the location. And the whole cast was there. And we got on a big bus, including Kirk Douglas and Robert Mitchum and Dick Widmark. And we went out to the location, which was the Independence, Missouri set that they had built. It was incredible. And they put me on a mule and a crew of 200 and 1,000 extras. And it was just a huge production from day one. And looking back on it, I was never involved with anything before or after as big as that production. And I must say, it ran as smoothly as anything I've ever been on. And I attribute that to the production team, but also to Andy McLaughlin, the director, and Bill Clothier, the wonderful cinematographer, and his crew, and a great cast. The interesting thing that Andy did is, when I said suddenly the whole cast was out on the sidewalk in front of the hotel, we worked every day, whether we were, in a specific scene, we had to go to work because we were background a lot of the time. We were part of the wagon train. And he said that to all of us. He said, "I'm sorry, I'm going to have, you guys have to be available on set." But what it did, which was interesting, is we got to know each other, and we sort of were on this journey together across the Oregon desert and through mountains and over cliffs. And so it was we all became very close friends. And for an 18-year-old kid, to play cowboy and chase Sally Field and have scenes with Robert Mitchum and Richard Widmark, it was a dream come true for me.
Can you remember how you got the part? Is it something you sought out, or it kind of came to you?
Yeah, I had been a child actor, and when I went into high school here, I decided I wanted to take a little brief vacation from it all. And amazingly, in my senior year, I didn't even have representation. An old agent of mine called and said, "I just read a script and there's a part for you it's you." And I said, I'm going to start college. I might get drafted. It was during the Vietnam War. If I'm not in school. And he said, no, it shoots the 3 months of the summer. So I said, well, yeah, let me go in. And I went in and met with Andy McLaughlin and the writer, Ben Maddow. And they had me read a scene just by myself. And then about a week later, typically I got a call back, and I showed up at their offices again, and it was to meet with Andy alone. And then as I finished the meeting with Andy, they brought in Sally. And I'm not sure whether Sally Field had the part or not. I think she may have already had it. I later found out that an old friend of mine, Roger Mobley, was also up for the part of Brownie Evans. And he was probably there either before or after me. And he told me later that he read with Sally. So I read a scene with Sally that day. And then another week went by and I was brought back, and it was just Sally and I. And we did like 3 or 4 scenes for Andy and Harold Heck, the producer. I knew then that I think I knew I had it, because we had such good chemistry. And she was, even then, the first movie she did, she was really good. And but then the weird thing that happened, like a month went by, and I thought, wow, I thought I had that damn thing. And my agent said, I haven't heard anything. I'm sorry, Mike. So I just figured I'd get ready for college and spend the summer at the beach or something. Next day, I got a call to go back in, and it was just Sally and I again, with a whole room of United Artists and MGM executives, and we did 2 or 3 scenes, and it went very well. And Andy said, wait outside. And so Sally and I went outside, and she said, I hope they tell us one way or the other today. And I said, yeah. So I guess she didn't have it. That's right. And Andy came out and said, so what are you doing this summer? And I said, I don't know. And he said, how about joining me in Oregon and making this movie? So that was how I got the part. And the interesting thing that happened the first day of shooting, other than this massive thing, was most of the shots were of Widmark, who played my father, of Dick Widmark and I riding mules across big fields, no dialogue, but long shots and scenic, beautiful stuff, which was very smart of them not to get right into the dialogue scenes. And so we're side by side on these mules all day, out alone most of the time. So I tried to strike up a conversation with Mr. Widmark, who I admired a lot for his work. And he totally ignored me, didn't even respond. And I thought, oh my God. And I remember going home the first night, and I called home and I told my parents, I said, I think Richard Widmark hates me. And then they said, oh, what? And I told them, I said, and my mom just said, just be professional, don't bother him, and do your job type of. So the next morning I went, we're back on the mules, and he's not saying anything and I'm not saying anything. And suddenly he just turned to me, he said, well, how are you doing this morning, Mike? Very warm and nice. I said, fine. And he said, it's good that we're together. He said, I think we're going to make a good team, father and son team. And he was just charming suddenly. And I guess I got a look on my face, and he said, something wrong? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, sir, I thought you were mad at me. And he went, oh. He said, I'm deaf in my right ear. I was on his right side. He said, were you trying to talk to me yesterday? And I said, yeah. I said, I thought you didn't like me. And he said, no, I'm so sorry. And from then on, I did another, well, we're going to talk about Death of a Gunfighter. Dick Widmark, I love the guy. Yeah.
As you mentioned, the film has an all-star cast and it's shot on location. What was the dynamic like between all the key players? Did everyone get along? Was it, harmonious?
Like I said, interestingly enough, we did get along because we made that trek. I mean, in a lot of ways, that mule and I became very good friends. We had the typical, let's say, creative differences. among our superstars. Dick Widmark, like I said, total professional, nice guy, very shy though, very, very standoffish to most people. Everybody misread Dick, I think. I didn't, I became a lifelong friend. But he was very professional and sort of distant. Bob Mitchum was the greatest enigma I mean, the guy was incredibly talented and brilliant and just pretended like he didn't want to be there. And smoked a lot of marijuana. And he was, I love Mitch. Mitch was unique. I still to this day try to figure out, what was going on inside his head. And then you had Kirk Douglas, who was a very nice man, but was a big ego, gigantic ego. And Mitchum and Widmark, Kirk Douglas would, especially we had scenes all together as a group, he would try to take over and basically try to direct the scene. And a couple times we had major arguments about, Widmark finally said, Kirk, why don't you let Mr. McLaughlin do his job and direct this? You're not directing this movie. But and the other great line that came out, I didn't hear it. It was told to me later by the unit manager. Was the unit manager had done a lot of pictures with Mitchum, and they had been watching dailies for a couple of weeks, and Mitchum was underplaying everything, very much so. And so this guy, Lee Lukather, said, Mitch, why are you underplaying all this stuff? And Mitchum paused and said, well, Brother Kirk is doing enough acting for all of us. So we had the typical ego stuff that happens, but nothing big. It was a happy set. And Mr. Douglas, Kurt, years later, after he'd had the stroke and everything, I became good friend with Michael and Joel. His two sons were up there on the, and I became lifelong friends with them. And years later, where was I at? I ran into Kirk Douglas, and he had his stroke, and he started talking to me. And he said, I was a real jerk on that film, wasn't I? And I said, no, you were okay. He said, no. He said, I've changed. He said, I was so full of myself. So he knew, it's hard being a movie star, keeping your crap together. I just came back from Oklahoma City. I hadn't seen one of my best friends is Kurt Russell. I did a lot of movies with Kurt, and I got him to be honored by the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and I got to present for him and his dad, which was great. And I just marvel at how Kurt has handled his stardom, and much better than anybody else I've ever. I think it was a combination of his family, who were very grounded, and meeting Goldie Hawn, who was dealing with the same problem of dealing with that stardom thing. Anyhow, other than those few moments with Mr. Douglas and Mr. Widmark, and Mitchum would just walk away. But he made it quite clear to me at one point that he didn't care much for Douglas as a person. But other than that, everybody got along wonderfully on that movie. Yeah.
So you've kind of covered the main stars there, but Jack Elam was one of the supporting actors. Did you have sort of many dealings with him?
Oh, yeah. I worked with Jack later too, when I was a writer, and just adored him. He was really brilliant. He had been an accountant, but had always wanted to be an actor. And he finally said, yeah, I've got to try to do this, or I'm going to hate myself the rest of my life. And Hank had this wonderful career. And that was after The Way West. I mean, he was always a villain or a bad guy. After when he got on, they let him do comedy, and of course he was brilliant at comedy. But Jack had that eye, and I'm 18 years old, and Harry Carey Jr., who I befriended very early on in that production, said, hey, you want to come to the poker game on Sunday? We had Sundays off. And I said, yeah, I'll come to the poker game. And we had per diem, we gave you $400 or $500 a week or something to eat. And I thought, I'll double my per diem and beat these old guys at poker. Well, Elam found out later he could count cards. He had the eye, so the poker face was, you didn't know whether he was looking at you or the cards. But also just a hell of a nice guy. And all those guys were nice. My experience with character actors, great character actors like Elam, Dobie Carey, is because they didn't have that stardom thing. They were just more approachable as people and more down to earth. Jack went on to do great stuff. I wrote a TV movie called Bonanza: The Return that had Jack Elam in it and had Ben Johnson in it, who again was a hero of mine. And I had lunch with the two of them to go over the script, and we'd go through every scene, and either Ben or Jack would say, do we really need to say this? Can we cut this out? And about 3/4 of the way through the script, I said, you guys, if you keep doing this, you're not going to have any dialogue. And they looked at each and in unison, they both said, we can handle that. But it was both towards the end. And the reason they didn't want it, I'm starting to understand, learning dialogue as you get older is, its memory is not what it used to be. But yeah, no, Jack was great. I shouldn't tell the story, but Jack, and I won't go into detail about it, Jack played the preacher, and he had a Bible with him all the time. Unbeknownst to all of us, he had taken, let's say, risque photographs out of a particular magazine and put pictures of all of our different heads on these risque. So he had this totally obscene Bible that I finally got to see. It was very funny though, but he'd be reading it, in the scene. Now you can watch the movie and you'd realize that he probably had a picture of Lola Albright, with her head on a naked woman. Anyhow, Jack was funny and really nice to work with. So was Dobie. Connie Sawyer, who played Sally Field's mother. Connie lived to 102. She just passed away recently. It went back to vaudeville days. She had a career that was fascinating. And Peggy Stewart, who was in all the B Westerns. Peggy just passed away about 3 or 4 years ago too. Roy Barcroft, who was in the B Westerns. Annie McLaughlin, whose father was Victor McLaughlin, had such respect for all these old character actors and Stubby K. It was really an amazing group of people.
I'm intrigued to hear what memories you have of Death of a Gunfighter, because it's a great film and probably lesser known, I would think, a little bit than The Way West, perhaps due to some great westerns came out the same year. But what do you remember about Death of a Gunfighter?
I love Death of a Gunfighter, and I agree with you that it's a underappreciated piece of work. I guess what I remember most was by then, Dick Widmark wanted me to call me up and said, I want you to be in this picture. So that was a nice compliment to begin with. And but I still had to, because Universal was that, I still had to screen test and deal with the director and all this stuff. But finally, I got the part. So I guess for me, what I remember most on that was the personal connection with Dick, and how much he taught me about acting on that, just in a very quiet way. We had a lot of scenes together, and we didn't have that in the Way West really that much. And so maybe that's my biggest memory. My other memory, obviously, is that Dick didn't get along with Robert Totten, who was the original director, which was sort of understandable because Bob Totten was sort of a difficult personality. I later worked with Bob again. Bob was a really good director. He was one of those people. He was, my mom used to say, he's his own worst enemy. He was sort of self-destructive, and it was his first feature as a director, and he's dealing with, you know, a superstar, and he was treating Dick Widmark like he did. Widmark was a rookie, you know, over directing him, and so that was very upsetting for me to watch that disintegration happen, because I was so close to Dick, and Dick kept saying to me, which was, I should have known something was up. He said, "What do you think of Totten?" And I'd say, "I think he's doing a good job, you know." And Dick would say, "Oh, okay, like that." You know, he never. But behind the scenes, as you well know, I'm sure, Dick went to the Universal Tower and the executives and said, "Him or me." And so they brought in Don Siegel, which was a marvelous choice. Don, totally different. You know, if Don gave you a direction, you went, "Wow." He just sort of let you do your thing, which, you know, I understand why Widmark liked that. And by then, I was so into the role, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I didn't need any direction. You know, again, talk about a list of great character actors in that movie. None of those guys. Carol O'Connor, I mean, my God, you know, and Larry Gates and Kent Smith and Morgan Woodward and Dobie Carey. So the rest of the shoot went very well. There was always a lot of tension those first 4 weeks, because Widmark would openly question Totten. And I had, you know, no one knew. I came in on a Monday morning. I was in the first shot, and we shot the whole thing on the back lot at Universal in that town. And so I had a little portable, you know, trailer dressing room. So I was getting into my dressing room, and I saw the assistant director walk by, and I said, I forget who it was. I said, "I'm in the first shot." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Could you give me a heads up of like 10 minutes before? I want to talk to Bob about something," meaning Totten. I think I had a question about the scene, and the guy got a weird look on his face, and he said, "Bob, you want to talk to Bob?" And I said, "Yeah." And the interesting thing about that was the first movie that neither Bob Totten or Siegel wanted to take credit on. I noticed, I to sort of refresh my memory, on MDB, that there was something that Widmark had something to do with keeping Totten's name off. That's not true. Dick would never have done that. Totten later told me, when I worked with him again, that he just felt that it wasn't his film anymore, and that's what Don felt too, that he hadn't done enough of the work. So Alan Smithee, one of the best directors I ever worked with. Someone said that Death of a Gunfighter is the best Alan Smithee film. This fictitious guy, and I think it was created because of that dispute. You know, Anyhow, the movie came out and did nothing. I think it was that time when Westerns were starting to lose their, and there were some really, I think Wild Bunch came out.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give Wild Bunch a step over us. Yeah. But I thought it was still a very well done film, and I thought it was one of Dick Widmark's best performances. And I got to say, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that performance. And like I said, that was the film that I learned the most about acting from Dick and from just talking to those guys, Victor French and Carol O'Connor. The other great thing on that, and it was really an unusual, daring move to cast Lena Horne as his love interest. This is we did it in the summer of '68. So interracial stuff was, and just meeting Lena Horne was great for me. I had a great opportunity. I didn't really know who she was. Crazy. And my dad said one day, let's have lunch at the studio. My dad was a writer. And I said, yeah, sure. And we had lunch at Universal at the commissary. And he said, can I come by the set? And I said, yeah, he never was interested in the sets or anything. And come to find out, of course, we come on this. He said, is Lena working today? So it was really cute. My dad had sort of a little crush on Lena Horne. And I just adored her. And for some reason, she latched onto me. I don't know why. I guess she knew that I had a good relationship with Widmark. And she misinterpreted, like a lot of people, as I said before, misinterpreted Dick's shyness for not liking you. And at one point, Lena said to me, does Widmark like me? And I said, Lena, he's the reason you're here. He went at the Universal executives and said, I want Lena Horne. And she said, I just don't feel the warmth. And I said, you're not going to get that. So just, and she was just, it was so fascinating to see how insecure she was about doing a dramatic role. And I don't know what your reaction was, but I thought she was wonderful in the film. I thought their chemistry, you felt a little bit of that coldness, but that was the Frank Patch character too. Obviously, he'd been sleeping with this woman for 40 years and suddenly asked her to marry him, but that was the other highlight. And off that set, I was dating the daughter of a woman, Julie London. I don't know if you know who Julie London was, but she was a very well-known singer and actress in television on a show called Emergency here. And her and her husband, Bobby Troop, were both, Bobby was a great songwriter, and she, on the weekends, you'd go up to their house and they had a music room. And after a lot of drinking and fun, everybody ended up in the music room, and Bobby would sit at the piano, and sometimes there'd be famous guitarists, like a guy named Tony Matullo, I think was his name. Anyhow, and they would jam, they would sing, and it was just fabulous. And I told Lena about Julie, and Lena said, I've never met her. I would love to meet Julie. Could you arrange that? I said, yeah. So one of the weekends, I brought Lena and her husband, and sure enough, we ended up in the music room, and I'll never forget it. Bobby sat down at the piano, this guitar started playing, and Julian and Lena were both on the piano, leaning on the piano. And Lena said, Bobby, do you know Stormy Weather? And Bobby went right into Stormy Weather. And Lena went into Stormy Weather, which was really amazing. But halfway through, Julie joined her. And it's a moment I'll always cherish. I mean, it was incredible, really an incredible moment. So Lena Horne, I must say, of maybe all the people I ever worked with, was the greatest artist. Yeah.
You jokingly said that Death of a Gunfighter is the best film by Alan Smithy. I think you're right, because it did seem to fool quite a lot of people. I don't know if you know this, but Roger Ebert wrote that the film is extraordinary. Director Alan Smithy, a name I'm not familiar with, allows his story to unfold naturally. So it had him fooled. He liked it.
Somebody told me, I remember, someone told me about that. Ebert loved Smithy. That I met Roger years later after that, I think, and charming guy. He brought up, he liked me in that film, which was very nice of him. Actually, I got the only bad review I ever got on that film by a critic named Rex Reed, and he didn't really attack my performance. He attacked what I looked like. I had bad acne and had pockmarks on my skin, and on the big screen, I guess they showed up more than usual. And he went into this thing about pockmark, blah blah blah. And I usually that was when I learned not to read the reviews, because good or bad, they're not really important. You don't really learn anything from that. You can watch your performance and maybe say, I should have done this, I should have done that. The interesting thing with Reed is I ran into him later, and I made it quite clear that I didn't appreciate. I said, if you wanted to talk about my talent, fine, but don't talk about the way I look, because you're uglier than me, I said. And he was so apologetic, and to the point of telling me that he was an alcoholic, and he probably wrote the review when he was drunk, and that he was a gay man in Hollywood, and it was difficult. I mean, he bared his soul to me, to the point where I finally said, I forgive you. But later on, I found he was notorious for doing those sort of reviews, which, I don't mind film critics, real good film critics, but just to attack somebody's appearance is stupid. That's what I thought. Anyhow, but yeah, Roger liked Death of a Gunfighter.
Yeah.
Gave it a thumbs up.
Yeah. So final question for me then is, if you could go back in time to any moment from either movie, whether it's a scene or a off-camera thing, what would you go back to? What's kind of the highlight of either, I suppose?
First day on that film, we were out at the Disney Ranch, which is right near my home now. It was just Dick and I, reunited, sitting by a pond, a little stream with fishing poles. And first day, usually nervous day, but I was great. I was with my mentor, my guy, and we shot that scene, which was it's still one of my favorite scenes. And when we first rehearsed it, this was maybe the beginning of the Totten Widmark clash. Totten wanted to speed it up. He said, just blah, 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 blah. You say. And Widmark said, I think it'd be better if we even slow it down more. He said, these are two fishing buddies and a father-son situation, you know, a surrogate father-son situation, and they're waiting for a fish to bite, and there's no rush, you know. And if you look in the movie, that's how we played the scene, and it's one of my favorite scenes I ever did. It was a funny scene because he said, "You know anything about sex?" and Widmark's reaction is just, you know, wonderful. I couldn't see that at the time we were doing it. I didn't see the movie. So yeah, I'd like to go back to that fishing hole because I miss him. And yeah,